What's up, YouTube fam? Welcome back to my Nahamo Nation book club. The five-man band is a popular trope that has been used in books and media for many, many years, and has been a staple of the entertainment industry basically as long as anyone can remember. If you don't know what the five-man band is, congratulations, you've clicked on the right video. I'm gonna tell you. Consisting of 5 main character components that can be rearranged in any number of ways. This has been used throughout modern times as a storytelling tool to make characters feel more like real people. It's a powerful, flexible trope that, once you know what to look for, can be easily recognized in media across the board, but especially in fantasy genre media. It's so common today and is such a prominent storytelling tool that even I, while writing my own books, though I tried to break all the rules of traditional fantasy storytelling, still freaking ended up using this trope before I even knew it was a thing. So now that I have discovered it, here's why it is, in my opinion, one of the greatest storytelling tropes of all time. As always, I will link any videos that I watched in the description box, and for this particular video, I will link the actual video that I watched after I wrote my books that taught me about this particular trope. As I said before, the five-man band consists of 5 key character types that act as guidelines for any group of main characters that you might find in your reading, writing, or in even popular movies. Those 5 character types are the leader, the lancer, the heart, the brain, and the tank. And often each character is associated with a specific element or color. Even certain personality types typically are associated with specific kinds of characters. And while many and most academic writers might have us believe that those 5 key components are in individual characters and they do not cross whatsoever, otherwise it's not a true 5-man band, the writers like me, who rebel against stiff and stuffy storytelling, would much rather argue the opposite. Mixing and matching the 5 character types so that the characters take on multiple different attributes of different kinds of characters can make for more relatable characters for those of us who want more authentic personalities. Which is the nice way of saying, I don't like rigid characters. These are concepts and trends, not unbreakable rules, and I will bend the trend until it buckles as much as I please. Which is exactly how I wrote the characters in my books, so I'm going to be using them as examples. Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't read the series. First up in our 5-man band, we have the leader. The leader is often the main character or the main hero of the story who has something to do with bringing all of the other characters together into the group. Now, in many instances, getting all 5 characters to focus on the same goal from many different plot lines can be the hardest part about writing the book as an author. Unless you're me. See, I didn't know anything about the 5-man band trope while writing my books, so it was super easy for me to not focus on the complicated aspects of the trope and just focus on the story. That being said, it was very easy to get my 5 main characters focused on the same goal. But looking back at it now, from the perspective I have today, it feels very lazy the way I did it, even though I just did it because that was part of the story. And why does it feel that way, you might ask? Because they're all siblings. All 5 of them. And they live in a cave in the woods together. And also, they all share a single immortal consciousness, but we'll save that for another video. That being the case, getting my 5 characters to all focus on the same goal is like convincing a child that ice cream is a good idea for dinner. I'm not saying ice cream's a bad idea for dinner, don't judge me. Now, while it's really easy to get them all focused on the same goal because they're all siblings, that doesn't mean they necessarily agree. Any of us with siblings can tell you, siblings fight a lot. They don't agree on everything. In fact, they often disagree on the way to get something done. It's like, yeah, okay, that's the goal, but they mostly disagree on the execution of how to actually do the thing. But this is where the leader character usually takes charge. In my books, in most situations, the leader character, even though you don't meet him until the end of the first book, the role of leader is taken over by Jay, the eldest of the 5 Nahamo siblings. Jay is an elemental firecaster who, unsurprisingly, is represented by the color red, the element fire, and his personality is very lively, confident, and charming. His siblings call him Hothead when he has a moment of irrational rage, and this is a pretty standard personality type for the leader role to have. He's very responsible, but he has a short temper, and the power to burn down anything and anyone who displeases him. And since Nahamos kind of like to pretend they're the bad guys, regardless of them doing way more good for the world. This quick, witty, fiery personality of his definitely helps them maintain that image of, oh no, we're the bad guys. Which, once again, we'll talk about why that is in a different video. But even though the Nahamos don't really see themselves as having a true leader, the role of the leader in the five-man band in the story is definitely held by Jay, I would say 90% of the time. And the other 10% of the time, he's kind of forced into the role of Lancer. And we'll talk about why at the end. The Lancer is the second character in our five-man band, and typically this character is created to be a direct opposition to the leader. The Lancer is the character who's most likely to have a rebellious attitude and try to either go off on their own and leave the group to solve the problem themselves, or to go off to gain some kind of extra character development or experience that they couldn't have with the group. The Lancer is your classic Vegeta to Goku, where they often even start off hating each other for one reason or another, but then somehow the leader, regardless of if it's with charm, good looks, or just relentless optimism, usually somehow ends up convincing them to join the team to work towards their shared goal. In my books, the role of Lancer is played by the middle brother, Joey, who is an elemental water caster. Joey, in contrast to his eldest brother, is represented by the color blue, the element water, and his personality is very introspective, introverted, at least compared to his older brother, Jay. He's a bit quieter, and he understands other people's emotions very well, to a degree where it almost makes him kind of psychic. That being said, he doesn't always understand his own emotions very well, which is why he is a Lancer. But having watched his brother his whole life, he's grown up learning how to throw his power around just as well as Jay does, but possibly has the darkest personality of the five siblings. His rebellious nature sneaks through a few different times throughout the story, but it's always in a beneficial way to the team, to the overall group. Knowing exactly when to use your inner darkness is a pretty common theme in this story. It's a theme that I explore countless number of times throughout the book series because it's a very important trait for the Nahamo siblings to have. And there's no one better at doing that than Joey. Well, except for Meli. The third character in the five-man band is called the Heart, and usually if there is a female character, she's the Heart. And she's known for being the character that kind of holds the rest of the team together in one way or another. Usually having some kind of psychic ability as if the world we're exploring is a magical one, the Heart is the most emotionally intelligent of the five-man band. They usually have the lovely job of keeping the other characters from ripping each other's hair out or going rogue and splitting up the group over a minor argument. The Heart is a peacemaker of the group, and although sometimes they are overlooked or entirely absorbed by other characters and don't really get their own, without the Heart archetype, the rest of the story wouldn't work, no matter how good the other characters are. Often the Heart has some emotional connection or romantic connection to either the leader or the Lancer, which usually it can make for some very interesting conversations. But other times, the Heart is just the sweetest or most innocent member of the team, which therefore makes all the other members of the team feel kind of protective of that person to try and kind of maintain that softness. Now, in my books, the Heart role is usually played by Meli, but the way she's represented can be kind of tricky. Meli is a mutated form of elemental caster and is what's referred to as a Sirena caster. She controls storms, electricity, and psychic spiritual energy in a way that no other character in the series has ever seen before. In my books, I use the elements fire, water, earth, air, and spirit to represent the different characters. And in this particular context, Meli represents spirit. But because she's mutated, she often loses control of these abilities, which can cause her to spiral in a dangerous way and hurt the people who are around her. This makes her four older brothers a little bit more protective of her, because they know that she could lose control at any minute. Not that she will, but she could, and that possibility is very dangerous in the world that they live in. But beyond that, she's their sister, the youngest sibling, and regardless of being an incredibly powerful caster herself, her brothers still worry about her losing control, even if they don't always say very much about it. But they don't so much worry about the character Meli, they're more worried about the author Meli, which I'll explain why at the end. The fourth character of our five-man band is known as the Brain, otherwise known as the smart guy. This is the one with the highest IQ, usually in regards to math, science, technology, or some other form of specific, complicated material that maybe the other characters don't quite have a grasp on. This character is usually not quite as strong, sturdy, or charismatic as, say, the leader or the lancer would be, and they usually rely on using their superior intelligence to benefit the team. Now, typically, this is also the character who, when a plan needs hatching, they're the first one to come up with a super creative solution to whatever the problem may be. But often, because they're so smart, they don't always value their physical body as much as their brain, and so, sometimes, they have tendencies to engage in A, self-destructive behaviors, or B, super modding their physical form to try and make it as strong physically and powerful as their brain. In some cases, but not all cases, the brain is usually the one in the back end, like the hacker or the dude working in the background to make sure everything runs smoothly, and they don't really get as many action scenes or cool fight scenes as the other characters. And that is where I threw the archetype right out the window and went as rogue as possible with my Brain character, making him just as cool as all the others. In my books, the Brain is the youngest brother, and his name is Jesse. He is a mutated form of puppeteer caster known as a ghostess, and he probably has the most badass casting form of anyone in the entire series. He is represented by green, the element earth, and just like nature, he can be very sturdy and stable, but he can also be an entirely wild card. He's definitely the smartest of the group, regardless of being very introverted and kind of keeping to himself most of the time. But when push comes to shove, I would not for any reason want to go up against this guy in a hand-to-hand battle. He will not only outthink any technique you line up against him, but he will literally suck your soul out of your skull and then send it zooming off into the underworld. Jesse's powers deal with the supernatural, mostly ghosts and that sort of thing, but his casting form is so cool. He can transform into basically a full-bodied skeleton with green flames coming off of him, and his skin just melts off his face. And this physical casting form is as indestructible as you can physically get. This dude has a wall of obsidian and lava rocks come down on top of him at the end of the second book, and then just stands up, shakes it off, pops his joints back into place, and walks it off like his foot fell asleep. The guy is a beast. But he's also the shortest, the skinniest, and the youngest of the brothers. He's also the least socialized. And therefore, when you try to have a conversation with him, he still sounds like a freaking dork. And I love it. And finally, also known as the big guy, the fifth member of our five-man band is known as the Tank. This is usually the strongest member of the team and is usually the biggest in one of three ways. They're either physically the biggest, physically the strongest, or have the biggest personality in the group. Known for being strong and sturdy and taking the brunt of most physically damaging attacks to protect the other members, this person and character are usually either just a human shield or a human battering ram. Using blunt force to pretty much just punch their way through any obstacle, this is usually a very well-rounded character who usually gets along really well with both the brain and the heart. Sometimes they use their muscles to do more of the thinking than their brain, and other times they end up being a really smart, intellectual person who just happens to be big, and so they get that role by default. But be it brain and brawn, or just a human battering ram, this is usually a very sturdy, stable character that you can always rely on. They always make strong battle moves, they always come out kicking and screaming, but usually, under all that super tough guy vibrato, a lot of the time they're a big softie on the inside. In my books, the Tank role is played by the second to eldest brother, whose name is Zane, and we meet him towards the end of the first book when he attacks the casters on the train tracks and tries to kidnap Meli. Why do I do this to myself? Represented by the color yellow in the element air, Zane is without a doubt the most extroverted of the four brothers, and he is what's known as a twin spark to his little sister Meli. Zane is what's known as a mimic caster, so he can learn any magical technique that he can visually see, and because of this, he watched his younger sister as she grew up and learned how to perfect her techniques, not only to help her learn, but also to help her control stuff in the event that she might, lose control and create huge hurricanes. We don't talk about it. But that's how he became her twin caster spark. He has a very loud, boisterous personality, and he'll try anything at least once, but because of this, he also has a tendency to not really think before he acts. He's a very intelligent individual, but he has very low impulse control. Go figure. Now, because I love anime and grew up being influenced by it quite a lot when I was younger, I have been told that reading my books feels like you're watching an anime. And I love that. And in some anime, it can take a whole season for the 5-man band to actually all get together and be working towards their shared goal. Which is why in my books, the first book is spent introducing you to the world so that you're comfortable with how the magic and everything works, before you're actually introduced to the true 5-man band, which is actually the main characters of the book, plus Tony. In the beginning, we have our male lead, Tony, who's our main character. But in this particular situation, Tony kind of acts as like a 6th Ranger character, but he's so cool that he's gonna get his own video, so I'm not gonna go there right now. And then before we even get halfway through the 4th page of the actual story, we meet our female lead, Meli, who, as we now know, is the heart in the 5-man band. Or is she? In the beginning of the first book, we don't even know the 4 brothers exist. There's some speculation that they were there, just kind of hiding in the shadows and watching everything go down. But we don't officially meet them until the last quarter of the first book. So in this case, Meli isn't acting as the heart, because she's kind of gone off on her own little mini adventure before the real adventure begins. Which actually would make her kind of a lancer, right? Except when shit goes sideways. Because Meli is the author, which her 4 brothers are well aware of, she often takes back the power from Jay in the most dangerous and necessary of instances. When she's alone with Tony and the friends they meet on the train tracks to the sea, Tony literally says, "We need a leader, so lead us." And she does. Because when he says that, Meli assumes an entirely different personality. She goes from this very sweet, almost passive kind of heart character to suddenly she's in charge. And this other personality is known very well by her brothers, as well as any of you on YouTube who have been watching my videos. And that character they know as Meli Red. This sudden personality switch takes her into this leader role, and she basically has to adapt the character traits and attributes of Jay in order to be a leader and get all of the casters on the train tracks to safety. At least, that's what she says she's doing. Because let's not forget, the Nahamo siblings built the 12 trials and the train tracks to the sea to escape the outside forces and the Normos who were demonizing them and basically wanted them dead. Because people aren't single characters. They don't fit into molds and cookie-cutter story tropes. Real people and really good characters are flexible and ever-evolving and constantly working towards trying to be that better version of themselves. That's why we read fantasy after all, because we identify with our favorite character who is everything that we want to be. Jay is a standard leader, who will become the Lancer when his sister's in control of the story. Joey is a standard Lancer, who becomes the heart when his sister needs someone who understands her. Jesse and Zane are both highly intelligent individuals, but I'd never want to arm wrestle either one of them. And Meli, she's a little bit of everything, isn't she? Because that's how characters are. That's how good characters are. They have layers, they have strengths, and they have flaws. We love the 5-man band trope because we love seeing a group of friends who, regardless of being so different, love each other and go on this epic journey to reach some shared goal. Which is how I accidentally ended up using the trope before I even knew tropes were a thing. Fantasy books have a funny way of showing us parts of ourselves that we didn't even really know existed. And luckily, they have a few more benefits than just that. So if you'd like to learn 6 surprising things that reading fantasy books does to your brain, I recommend you click on my other video if you'd like to learn exactly about that. Thank you all for watching. I love you all so much. Naidoken Nahamo. See you in the stars.